Chapter 3 Caged in Bones. A cacophony of degrading cries erupted from the shambling vehicle while it dragged itself across every agonizing inch of the parking lot, resubmitting itself to a night between the white lines, hoping for rain to wash away the rust. Yellow, dim street lamps provided a minimal glow 30 feet above the near-empty lot, hardly qualifying as a source of illumination with a 6-foot radius on the desaturated pavement. The tires squealed to a halt just before the apartment complex, the exterior walls just wide enough to reflect the headlights back into the windshield. The keys were swiftly removed and the car gave a final whimper before falling silent. Everything settled and the ringing in his ears grew ever present. Leaning back in his seat, he let his head bounce off the cushion, then settle. A wiry itch pressured his eyes, forcing him to vigorously rub them until he was seeing blue and yellow spots. The pounding of his beating heart sent waves of energy through his muscles, which carried on and dissipated in the fabric of the seat. Body limp and mind numb from the recent ordeal, his eyes rotated to the passenger seat and fell on the paper bag buckled in beside him. Seeing the dark gray strap holding the delicate bottles within, he reached for his own buckle and discovered it had never been set. Thinking nothing of it, he undid the other and threw his own door open. The interior light lit up and provided guidance as he stuffed the bag under his arm and exited the vehicle. A crisp, dry taste entered his nose and he stopped to observe his surroundings. The small blacktop lot was locked in place by dense encompassing trees, creating a definitive boundary separate from other buildings. The lot was empty, save for another car or two. Everything outside of this paved square was obscured in darkness, unexplored, and held no interest to him whatsoever. Though he did suffer the consistent noise from another complex just on the other side of the trees. That one was smaller, but full of college kids who had a weekly schedule seemingly set to irritate him. Across the street sat an antique store that had long since been bustling, and just beside that was an empty lot where a foreclosed house had been demolished years back. Scattered trees with decaying leaves filled in the pockets of underutilized space. From where he stood, this little speck of dust in the world that he lived, he truly felt alone. Though just beyond the buildings across the street lie 100 more. Behind these trees and just along the road were many more lives and businesses, all as dead and rampantly spiteful as the last. This period of observation was enough to shake the cobwebs from his mind after the impossibly long 30-minute drive from the job site. But the silence that followed him assisted in jacking up his internal angst. The world was hollow feeling, nailed to the earth in a nihilistic dream state of fabricated peace and absence of life. The few surrounding buildings provided no light or sense of accompaniment. Though life existed all around him, not a soul dared leave their home after 10 o'clock for fear of the ones who would be so bold as to wander the streets. The glass bottles scraped against each other in the bag as he moved away from the beaten Subaru and proceeded toward the unwelcoming front door. Dead plants adorned the short 4 steps he climbed each day until he was met by the biggest glare in this building's security. A large wooden door with a single lock was all that barred trespassers from entering. Each tenant had a duplicate of this key, 4 in total, and yet there was always a new face wandering in the short halls. Reaching into his left pocket, he removed the jingling keys and flipped through them until he came across the correct one. With one hand, he finagled the key into the door and let himself in. The first step inside was as disappointing as each time before it. The light directly above the door flickered endlessly and was accompanied by the smell of stale cigarettes and what tasted like old steamed carrots. Moving down the narrow hall, he thought about the other tenants. How inside their 600-square-foot dorms, they had an entire world of their own. A different layout, a different smell, and a different view from the window. A new perspective. Halfway down the hall, he reached the staircase on his left and ascended them, taking a couple steps up and then turning left up a couple more until he stood in a new hallway directly above the first floor. A new thought cropped up. Out of 10 total rooms for rent, only 4 were occupied. Of those 4, only he and one of his neighbors were home multiple nights in a row. All the others seemed to be gone for extended periods of time, making this apartment feel like it was already dead. That bred the thought of what the world looked like and sounded like from within one of the empty rooms. Standing on the top step, he faced forward and could see the last identical staircase in front of him, which rounded up to the 3rd floor. A new set of doors occupied his vision, these in less disarray but no more inviting. He left the stairs and moved along the hallway to his right. Apartment number 78, second floor, second door on the right, housed uncomfortably at 248 Morrigan Way in some small, forgotten city in the armpit of Florida. Plagued by poverty and crime, it was not an ideal place for anyone to live. At the time, however, it was his best option considering his financial limitations. A soft click from his second key undid one of the two locks. Directly above the personally installed bolt was the door handle and another keyhole, the original. With the two undone, he was allowed entry, though he hesitated. Returning the keys to his pocket, he raised his now empty hand in front of his face. The door creaked open due to the slant in the building and revealed a completely dark void. He grimaced at his quivering hand. The folds of his palm and calluses on every fingertip told a long and tragic story of pain and hardship. Some feeling of rage built up deep within his gut, a negativity he had no room for, yet allowed safe passage. A sigh, and his hand pushed the door the rest of the way, followed by a loud, rusted creaking. Closing the door behind him, he stood in shadows for a brief moment before flicking the light switch on the wall to the right of the door. There was a slight delay before the light above dimly emitted a yellow glow. From here, he could see almost everything he owned. To his right, directly beside the door, was a standing coat rack that held a paperboy hat, reflective vest, and an umbrella hung by its curved handle. Following the wall to his right, past the rack, was where the counter space began, wrapping in a horseshoe shape to the far corner, curving around the back wall and making a final hook around the wall which mirrored the first, ending at a small divider wall which housed a landline phone mounted. To the left of the entrance walking in was a boxed television set placed on a rickety end table. In front of the TV was an ovular coffee table, then a love seat which was worn to the springs. Just beyond the couch was another wall which was nearly perpendicular to the wall which housed the phone. Between these two dividers was about a 6-foot gap that led to a dark intersection. A door to the left to a small bathroom with nothing more than a sink, shower, and toilet. Opposite to that door was another that opened inward to his tiny bedroom, which only contained a twin-size bed, nightstand, dresser, and a useless window that had its glass painted white by some previous tenant. Taking a short stride into his tiny home, feeling the emptiness settle in his gut, he moved to the kitchen. He flipped up another light switch located on the dividing wall beside the phone, illuminating the faded tile floor and countertops which were decorated with trash and tools. He cleared some space by shoving a stale bag of chips and a couple of water bottles to the side and placed a paper bag on the countertop. A haunting ringing in his ears perpetuated the isolation he was forced to endure. These walls had properties similar to dense stone, thick enough to absorb all noise and somehow able to emit the sensation that the building itself was breathing deeply. At times, the walls appeared to shrink and expand, creating a vacuum effect and stealing your breath as you waste away alone. He knew that these walls had hundreds of layers of paint on them, making them uneven and manipulated by temperature. Like wading through a dimension completely separate from his own, Alex let out a long breath and rubbed his head once again. A headache formed from the nothingness that giggled behind his ears. His eyes were drawn to the bag, but he reluctantly took a retreating step, instead moving out of the kitchen and approaching the dark intersected hallway where he entered his bedroom on the right. His single bed was tucked away in the back corner, beneath the window, and had a small nightstand pressed tightly against the frame. At the foot of the bed was the vertically stacked 4-drawer dresser. He had his room arranged this way to allow as much walking room as possible. It wasn't enough. There was no closet, nowhere to store anything, so he owned nothing else. Using the 4 feet between the foot of the bed and the doorway, he shuffled through the drawers and found a change of clothes. Light blue hospital pants and a white tank top was all he needed for the night, despite the heat being sporadic at best. Leaving the day's covering stripped to the floor, he left the room and moved to the kitchen, returning to the bag. Stiff fingers made it difficult to tear open the bag, but once he had done so, he was relieved to find a large bottle of whiskey intact. He moved it to an empty space next to the refrigerator for later on, knowing it would be better to not start with that. Instead, he opened the fridge and tried his best to ignore the foul stench that leaked onto the floor. He lazily reached to the back and removed a bottle of beer wrapped in a wet paper towel for maximum chill. Body strained, he slowly moved away from the kitchen and into the living room, setting himself harshly onto the dense couch. Each spring screamed and cried out under his weight as he shifted to find a comfortable position. Taking the remote from the floor by his feet, he extended his hand and turned the box on, filling his apartment with a gray-blue static. Eyes wide, pupils shrunk into pinpricks as he stared at the blinding explosion of millions of black and white specks which erratically skipped around the screen. The visual itself was almost hypnotizing enough to subdue all will to move. A part of him was content there, just watching the white noise forever, but the better part of him reacted. Standing himself quickly, he stepped around the crusted coffee table by his knees and stood next to the glowing box, then gave it a hard smack to its side. Nothing happened. Growing more frustrated, Alex adjusted the various dials and knobs, but to no avail. Finally, he gave up and manually turned the television off, embracing the silence once more. He returned to the couch with weight in his steps, but before he could plop himself back down, a thought struck, a lingering responsibility that he must fulfill. Though this fresh notion infected his mind, his eyes continued to linger on the bottle he had yet to open. His tongue tensed as he imagined the flavor, the burn of every gulp, and the lasting effect it would have on him. A chance to forget and try again, bathed in the heat that would consume his flesh the more he drank. All the promises of every drop appealed to his vulnerability, but the haunting words of Paul interrupted his plight. Alex disconnected his glare from the bottle and moved past the living room, stopping at the dividing wall by the kitchen. There he was met with the telephone, and all the courage he thought he had drained away. It was late, but not too late, surely. She was a night owl, and there was almost no reason for her to be in bed this early. His hand had begun reaching for the phone before he could convince himself one way or the other. 1 ring, 2, then 3. It seemed like he may have dodged the responsibility for now, or so he thought. "Hello?" A smooth, warm-hearted voice greeted him, dulcet in nature and unassuming in tone. "Hey, Auntie Janet." Alex responded awkwardly, clearing his throat. "Alex, how are you, dear?" she asked with delight. I'm good, I guess." "Is everything okay? I haven't spoken with you in nearly a month. How is work?" "I'm okay. How are you?" He dodged the question. "I'm doing very well, actually." "Good." An awkward silence crept between them. "So?" she started. "You didn't answer my question. How is work?" He could hear the smile in her voice. "Work, right. Well, actually, that's what I'm calling about. Paul had to let me go today." The shame in his voice was clear as day. A genuine sadness was layered over her voice. "Oh, sweetie, how did this happen?" "It's been an ongoing series of mistakes, and today was the last one. It's no one's fault but my own." "Were you drinking on the job?" she stated bluntly. He sighed, biting his instinctively aggressive tongue, instead resorting to sarcasm. "What can I say? I learned by watching my dad." "You know, I've never had a single drop of alcohol in my life," she stated blandly. "Really? How did you manage that one?" "I learned by watching my dad," she said in a very cold way. There was a clear underlying tension between them, an obligation to be kind, but each harboring stress under the surface. He felt a strong urge to hang up. She sighed and her tone shifted to worry. "Okay, maybe I can give Gail a call. You can go back to working on cars." "Auntie, I'm not finished yet. Paul took me aside and told me he might have another job lined up. And Gail wouldn't take me back. I crushed 2 of his fingers, remember?" "Oh, yes, of course." She then gave a sigh of relief. "Well, that's certainly good to hear. What kind of work will this be? Something a little less strenuous, I hope." He chuckled. "You know well and good he doesn't book desk jobs." "Nah, I'm sure it'll be something heavy. Whatever it is will have to be done without any fuck-ups on my end." "I hope the job is inside, at least. It has been so dreadful outside lately," she expressed concern. "I know, but I heard that this cold wave is supposed to lift in a day or 2, so hopefully I can get some sun." "If the cold is too much for you to handle, I can always make you a scarf," she giggled. "Oh, sure, a scarf that can only be worn 2 or 3 times out of the year when it happens to get below 40 degrees. Sounds like a great idea." "I'll have you know that Nancy and I wear a lightweight silk scarf almost every day. It keeps the sun off our necks and is very fashionable, thank you very much." She expressed assertive sarcasm but held a teeth-showing smile behind her words. Alex couldn't help but snicker. Whatever you say, Auntie. I hope you and Nancy enjoy being the only two people in the state to wear scarves. Your mother used to wear scarves. The line went quiet on both sides. Only hushed breathing escaped his lips as he intently listened to the whirring silence. When? I never saw her wear any scarf. His voice was monotone. Back when we were children, we used to live up east, and it gets mighty cold in the winter. We weren't the richest family in town and couldn't afford very warm clothing. So my grandmother had made us each a scarf, one blue and one red. Well, like I said, the only two. Standing in front of the wall in a nearly suffocating dim light, his head hung low and the phone cord swayed with every small movement. I ended up losing my scarf a week before Christmas. Oh, I begged my mother to get me a new one, but she told me over and over that I needed to learn this lesson and take better care of my things. I was devastated, and at the same time, jealous of my sister. That is, until Christmas. She took a stuttering breath in and held it for a moment before continuing. When Christmas came, Barbara had woken me up before everyone else and handed me a paper bag. I opened it up, and my oh my was I shocked to discover her scarf was inside. I asked her why, and she told me that red looked better on me anyways. She then began to blissfully giggle to herself at the thought of this happy memory. Even Alex gave a slight smirk, listening to her joy. She continued to sniffle and giggle quietly to herself, clearly experiencing a deeply sad and nostalgic flashback. I'm sorry, sweetie. I shouldn't have rambled on. She sniffled, recovering from the sadness. It's okay. It was a nice story, he said quietly. Alex, I know things are hard right now, but they will get better. You have been through so much, and I want you to know that I love you. She spoke sincerely. He quickly got uncomfortable with her uplifting words. So many times has he had to listen to the "it's gonna be okay" speech that had become forever nauseating. I know, Auntie. He cranked his shoulder in a small circle to release a knot that had been formed. I just wanted to let you know about this. If he doesn't find me other work, you may have to take over rent for a month or two. She hesitated to respond. We'll see if it comes to that. He felt cold hearing her say that. The tone in her voice wasn't very inspiring. In fact, it felt almost dismissive. It gave an overall bad feeling in his gut and made him want to change the subject. How's Lucky? Like flipping a switch, she immediately got a newfound joy in her voice. Oh, she's absolutely wonderful. I swear this old gal never stopped learning new tricks. Just the other day, I asked her to get the throw pillow from the living room, and she came back a minute later with the exact pillow. The excitement in her voice was uplifting. Wow, Alex smiled. Not bad for a mutt. She's no mutt, Janet frowned. She's my little Lucky. He chuckled. I know, I'm just playing. She gave a brief sigh through her nose, which hit the speaker of the phone like a gust of wind. All right, I have to go. It's been a long day, he said. Okay, dear. Please give me a call when you can. I miss you. Her voice became quiet at the end. I know. Good night, he said quickly and hung up the phone with a hard clack. Immediately, his eyes shot to the ceiling and both hands ran through the half-inch of hair on his head. A long exhale rolled over his lips before relaxing his muscles and turning back to the empty apartment. Damn it, he groaned. Why did she have to bring her up? Every simple phone call can never be simple. There always has to be something that halts the world around him. Most of the time, it was her memory, which always led to his wretched face. There was no pleasant reminiscing, no nostalgic callback to happier times. At least, if there was, it didn't last long. Just mentioning his mother brought with it a spiral of guilt and anger. Her face and name glued to the front of his mind, denying all other ideas and thoughts. A never-ending trial of his sanity, every instant snipped another piece of that which he loved, until there would be nothing left. His father made many mistakes, but none so tragic and damaging than the pain he effected upon his mother. No beating compared to the ire, The rage that fatal day. In the end, the man got what he deserved, but the hole Alex felt in his heart would never heal. Alex was still, locked in place in a whirlwind of silent misery. A conscious sliver of him tried to focus on positive things. Things like his aunt, how she saved him from drowning in sorrow after his mother had passed. She put him here, fed him, and found him work. That woman is a saint, and he is grateful for all she's done. Maybe that's why this all hurts so bad. Just another fuck-up in a long list of fuck-ups. He exhausted every chance she has given him, and yet somehow he was given another. His unconscious mind was carried by the remaining will of his body. Moving away from the phone, he was finally able to set himself down on the couch for more than a moment. Taking the neck of the bottle between his tight fingers, he bit onto the seal cap and pried it open with his teeth, a trick Robert had taught him a while back. He spit the cap onto the table and took in the musty smell of booze, hesitating for a moment and pushing it away from his mouth. He examined the label and fizzy liquid inside. Paul's words once again echoed in his brain, that this job must be done sober and with decency. Alex had every intention of giving it his best shot, especially now after speaking with his aunt. Then again, he wasn't hired yet.